discussing about the terms related with the vectors. We have started the motion in a plane. 2 classes we have already done. Today I will be discussing some more things that is related with the vectors. Firstly, we'll be discussing about the 2 types of one more vector is given, like we have the position vector and the displacement vector. We have position vector and we have the displacement vector. Now let us see what is a position and what is a displacement vector. Suppose we have an xy plane, because we are dealing with the 2-dimensional, because it is a motion in a plane. So everything that we'll be discussing in this chapter, it will be in the form of 2 dimension. Here also, if I consider we have an xy plane. Suppose if I consider that we have a point P here. We have a point P here. This is the origin O. This is X. This is Y. This is having a coordinate of suppose X and Y. I have just considered a point P in a plane. It is not fixed in which point you have to take. But when we be doing the numerical, that point, your point will be fixed. Clear? Now, if this is a point P, from the origin, when you take the position vector should be drawn from the origin up to the point where it is taken. You take a vector from the origin up till the point where it is taken. So this will be your position vector. This is how the position vector is represented. It is written by the letter small r vector. Clear? So when you will be getting the r vector, always remember that that is a position vector. Go to the displacement vector. For the displacement we need 2 points, because we already know for the displacement we need initial point and also we need a final point. This is x, this is y coordinate. So this is point 1, this is point 2. If I consider this is a point P and this is a point Q. Point P is suppose your initial point, suppose x1, y1 coordinate, and this is having a coordinate of x2, y2. These are some of the coordinates of P and Q. For drawing the displacement vector, firstly you need to draw the position vector of both the points P and Q. So draw one vector from the origin to the point Q. Draw one vector from the origin to the point P. Okay, so this will be your R1 vector and this will be your R2 vector. Sorry, I have considered this is a initial point, this will be a final point. So this will be a suppose R1 vector and this is your R2 vector. When you draw a displacement vector, for drawing the displacement vector we need 2 points, initial point and a final point. Initial is this, final is this. You draw a vector from the point P to the point Q. This represents your displacement vector, represented by delta R vector. Clear? So this is our position vector and the displacement vector. So you need to draw this in your copy. So next part that I am going to do is about the addition of the vectors. How to add vectors. Then we'll be going for the subtraction of the vectors. Then we'll be going for the multiplication of the vectors. Yeah. So we'll start one by one. For suppose if you want to write the definition of the position vector and a displacement vector, you can write the definition as, for position vector, a vector drawn from the origin to the point where it is taken. That will be the definition of position vector. Again I am repeating, a vector from the origin to the point where it is taken is known as position vector. For the displacement vector, if you want to write a definition, the displacement vector of a moving particle in a given interval of time is a directed line segment from the initial point to the final point. Okay, again I am repeating, displacement vector of a moving particle in a given interval of time is a directed line segment from the initial point to the final point of the particle is called as a displacement vector. Write this in your copy. We go to now addition of vectors. Addition of vectors. Now suppose for the addition of the vectors, I am giving you two vectors, vector A and vector B. Two vectors are there, vector A and vector B. Suppose these two vectors are collinear vectors. Okay, these two vectors are collinear vectors. Or it can be equal also, it can be negative also, that we'll be discussing afterwards. We are considering collinear vectors, and according to the rule of addition of vectors, how to add these two vectors you see. First of all, you take one as a reference vector. I am taking vector A as a reference vector. Okay, you have to take the one vector as a reference. Second vector which is present, what we have to do, according to the rule, the tail of the second vector should be added with the head of the first vector. Tail of the second vector, this is your tail, okay? This is tail, this is your head. The tail of the second vector should touch with the head of the other vector. So this will be your vector B. Now I can add it, and when we get the addition of the two vectors, we call that as a resultant, represented by R. So R will be equals to, it will be A plus B. This is how we add the two vectors. Okay, this is how we add the two vectors. Now suppose if I go to the other one, if the two vectors that is given, this is a collinear one, I'll take another one which is also collinear. This is vector A, this is vector B. You can see here both the vectors are directing along the same direction. Here the vectors are directing along opposite direction. How will you add these two vectors then? For adding these two vectors, the rules is always the same. You have to touch the tail of one vector with the head of the other vector. Okay, so here what we need to do, one of the vector from here, if you want to add it or if you want to subtract it, what we have to do, you have to change the position, change the direction of the vector. One vector, I will be changing the direction of this B vector. If I change the direction of this vector, so this will be becoming vector B. But since we have changed the direction of the vector, there will be a minus. Now, how you can add it? This is suppose vector A. The other vector will be your minus of vector B. This is how the addition should be done. Tail of this should be touched with the head of the other one. So the resultant here it will be R equals to A minus of B, or A plus minus B. Plus minus B. If I break it, it will be A minus of B. Clear? So we have also got as the subtraction of the vectors. This is your addition of vector. Subtraction means just addition of a negative vector. You can see here, addition of a negative vector. Okay, so this is what we have to discuss for today. In the next class, we'll be discussing, suppose if your vector is not collinear, then how will you add the vectors? So that we'll be discussing in the next class. We have some rules regarding that. So thank you for today.